Tony Seba, Peter Diamandis, and a few others were part of the reason, my inspiration for starting this YouTube channel. Well, now Tony Seba has made some very interesting comments about what he believes is the future of the automotive industry. And if he is correct, there will be not just bankruptcies, but a collapse. Basically a collapse of the entire automotive industry. Here's what he said. Hello, my friends. Welcome to the channel. Now, that's not what Tony said. That's just what I'm saying. Great to see you. Thank you for tuning in. My name's Sam Evans, and I'm coming to you from Thailand. Not really by choice. I mean, it is choice, but, a little bit forced, coerced choice to get cancer treatment for my wife here. If you want to know more about that, I'll put a link in the description to her GoFundMe campaign. Thank you, everyone, for your donations. Been amazing. Your support has been just absolutely incredible. Market share of EVs will hit 50% in China this year, and global new car sales could plunge by 75% in 2030. These are two forecasts made by Tony Seba. And if you want to actually see these, you can see them in the episode of the Driven podcast. I'll put a link in the description below. Now, the Driven is an Australian website, and I was very fortunate to actually present with some of the riders or the actual staff of the Driven at Fully Charged Live in Sydney. I've got to tell you, these are some very, very smart guys. And like me, they have a lot of respect for what Tony Seba is saying. Now, I'm not sure that means they agree with him, because these are some pretty bullish, pretty aggressive and scary things to think about. Very scary, in fact. And Tony Seba is the co-founder of Rethink X. They're known for their research on technology, or S-curves, which illustrate how throughout history, technology uptake goes slowly but then accelerates really, really quickly. Now, recently, websites such as Clean Technica have said that we've hit this S-curve where acceleration of EV adoption is actually proving to be rocketing up in that S-curve pattern where it's about to go really, really fast. And the interesting thing is here, some CEOs of automakers already believe that that's true, such as the CEO of Volvo and Polestar, the CEO of Li Auto. They made some interesting comments recently, and I think people are not paying enough attention to what they're saying. They're saying this disruption is going to happen really, really, really quickly. Now, I first learned about Tony Seba via Singularity University, and Peter Diamandis, he has some professors there who discuss solar energy and the world's energy disruption, which is happening right now. Obviously, fossil fuels are being disrupted at an incredible speed. It's actually fascinating to watch because governments are changing their projections completely. Over the last 12 months, we've seen an entire change. Many people said, when I started making predictions, when I started this channel nearly 2 years ago, I started saying things that people said I was insane. They said, I'm going to unsubscribe because you're making these ridiculous predictions. They're lunacy. I was saying that I believe the entire world, well, not the entire world, the entire Western world would hit nearly 100% renewable energy by 2030, right? At the time, that was considered insane. But now, well, even the Australian government is saying, hey, Viking, you know what? We will hit about 90% by then. And that's now. Will that change in the future? I think it will. I think it will hit 100% in Australia. In fact, one state in Australia has already hit 100%. In fact, no, 2 states have hit 100% already. Some of the biggest coal plants are already shutting down. The price of running them is just too high in comparison to the alternatives, which continue to get cheaper. Now, Seba's work at Rethink X focuses on public technology disruption and technology convergence that leads to phased changes in the world's energy, transport, information, and food systems. Now, he hasn't gotten everything right, but his predictions have in general proven to be correct. In 2014, Seba predicted that battery costs would drop from $500 per kilowatt hour to $100 per kilowatt hour by 2023. That prediction has proven to be incredibly accurate. In fact, lithium iron phosphate battery chemistry right now, which is in more than 60% of the world's electric cars being produced, over the last 6 months has brought the cost of batteries down to just below $100 per kilowatt hour. How did Seba know this? Nearly 10 years ago. I mean, 1/5 of the cost he predicted. At the time, people thought he was insane. He got it right. Now, the Driven actually said to him, what's happening in China and how does it compare to other regions? And this is what he said. Now, the Driven actually said to him, after returning from this Shanghai auto show, how do you compare that to the LA auto show? And he said, frankly, it was pathetic. There was a handful of electric vehicles. Most of them are expensive. Now he's talking about LA show here. Many of them were not even for sale. I just came back from Shanghai and what I saw was amazing. I mean, just the sheer quality for the cost of the EVs that Chinese automakers are producing is stunning. And also there are many automakers in China that are achieving scale. This year, EVs may well achieve 40 to 50% market penetration in China. Now, currently we're at around 30%. What you're going to see over the next few years is most foreign automakers being pushed out. Not Tesla, but most automakers pushed out of the Chinese market just because of economic reasons, just because they don't have products at the right cost and capability for the Chinese markets. We've already seen this year, first quarter of this year, right? The average sales decline of Japanese automakers is 38%. Now, Seba went on to say this. If you look at 3 technologies or sets of technologies, 1 is autonomous, 2 is electric, and 3 is on-demand transportation, meaning like robotaxis. We're seeing the on-demand transportation now. Uber, Didi, Lyft. It's been happening for more than 10 years. In parallel to that, we're seeing the electric vehicle disruption. Seba says that most analysts and policymakers see the EV disruption as a clean caterpillar rather than a new butterfly. It's seen as a 1:1 transition where every internal combustion engine vehicle is simply replaced with an electric car. Seba says this isn't how disruption happens. I mean, it's how our brains simplify things, but it's not actually how it will happen or how disruption plays out. He said, the day that we get level 4 autonomous technology ready and approved by regulators, when that converges with on-demand and electric transportation, we will get what we would call transportation as a service. Now, I want to make this clear. German automakers say they already have level 4 technology for their cars, and it's in their cars now. No one agrees with that. That's just the kind of marketing spiel. For some reason, we don't actually hold German automakers under the kind of microscope that we do Tesla. But if we were to, we would see some of their claims are complete, utter malarkey. I mean, utterly bogus. They do not yet have level 4 driving capabilities. Now, don't get me wrong, if they did, that would be awesome. But they're not quite there yet. He said, some call it robotaxi. Essentially, when that happens, the cost per mile of transportation is going to drop from 10 to 20 times. It'll be 10 to 20 times cheaper for you to get to point A to point B using a robotaxi than actually using your own car. Now, I'm not saying what Seba said here, this is what I'm saying, but basically what this means is owning a car will be a luxury, a very expensive luxury. Now, will it be expensive in the real world? No, it won't be. It'll just mean it'll be a lot more. It'll be like, okay, you could buy a pizza or you can own a pizza shop. So even if gasoline automakers gave away their cars, that's still going to be a lot more expensive than the cost of transport as a service. He goes on to say, for most people who can barely pay their bills, it won't make any sense to own a car. Now, that may not be you, but he's not referring necessarily to you. He's saying for most people. And he's right. Do I spend $50,000 over the next 5 years to own a car? Or do I pay $100 a month for a subscription to transportation as a service? Now, the really cool thing, I've mentioned this before, if you actually subscribe to this service, you won't, the big advantage here that people are actually overlooking is this. You won't be stuck with your car. Let's say you go buy a Tesla Model Y. Good car, right? Can do lots of things. But it can't really go off-road. It can't really transport 8 people. There's lots of things that one type of car can't do versus another. For example, a Cybertruck. It's a big vehicle. How often does the average person need a Cybertruck? You might need it a few times of the year, you might need it a few times of the month, maybe you need it every day, so you'll buy one. But most people don't actually need a pickup truck every day. They buy it because they might need it sometimes. So this is the big advantage of transportation as a service. You might subscribe for $100 a month, but you can get any type of car that suits what you need on that particular day. He says that annual auto sales will drop by 75% by 2030. Now, if this happens, then the automotive market is going to collapse. There will be bankruptcies left, right, and center already. But this will mean there will be a lot more bankruptcies. Very scary to invest your money, I think, in the automotive industry right now. You have to really be sure that you're picking a winner. If you do pick a winner, there'll be a ton of money to make. If you don't, yeah, you could lose a lot of money. He says electric vehicles will do around 500,000 miles. I think he's wrong. I think they'll do 1 million miles. Anyhow, compared to internal combustion engine vehicles that get around 140,000 miles or 230,000 kilometers over their lifetime. This means that EVs will last 4 to 5 times longer, meaning the global car market will likely drop eventually by 75% because people won't need to replace their cars as often. People are going to be buying vehicles a lot less often, he said. So with that, essentially cut the global vehicle market by a factor of 4 or 5. Soon enough, you're going to see million-mile EVs. And what that means is that over 10 years, you're going to need just one EV for 10 petrol internal combustion engine vehicles. Either way, it's pretty much over for the internal combustion engine. Synthetic fuels won't help them in this scenario either. In fact, if anything, it makes it worse. It makes the decline faster because of the incredible cost of synthetic fuels. Now, you might be thinking, Tony sounds crazy, but I have to ask you, how many other people predicted what he predicted? How many other people said that battery costs would go from $500 per kilowatt hour to 100 and actually got the time frame pretty much correct? I don't think anyone did. Now, Tony says that the world's entire transport energy system is currently highly centralized, with just a handful of multinational oil companies controlling the global transport energy supply chain. The convergence of renewable energy with electric vehicles will have a decentralizing effect. He's not the only one saying this, by the way. There's quite a few other billionaires making similar claims. And Tony says that this will have an enormous impact on global geopolitics. Everything is going to change, he said. It's going to happen the exact opposite that we saw in the early 20th century. In the 20th century, we saw increased centralization. So the car essentially meant that we needed petroleum, which is only available in a few places around the world. The car itself needed scale economies, oil, coal, gas, industrial, everything. They were all based on scarce resources that are not available everywhere. So everything in the 20th century changed. War changed. Geopolitics changed. All because of the car. And that's true. I mean, a lot of people think America has gone to war quite a few times over oil. And they're not the only ones. I mean, what's Russia doing right now? Resources. What we're going to see starting around the 2030s is the total opposite. The 5 foundational sectors of the economy, energy, transport, food, information, and materials, are going to be based on super abundant, really low cost, localized, distributed production, says Seba. In energy production, we're going to see essentially solar, wind, and batteries. Again, solar, wind, and battery disruption is not going to be a clean version of today's system. It's not a caterpillar. It's going to be dramatically different. It's going to be super local, and it's going to be massively different properties. But I think he makes a good point here. Isn't it brilliant that we can decentralize in this way? Isn't it brilliant that we can get away from our dependence on global oil companies, Saudi Aramco? I mean, really, how many people in the West are like, yeah, I want to give my money to Saudi Arabia? I mean, realistically, do you feel that way? I don't think you do. The great thing here about solar, wind, and batteries is that eventually, rather than spending our money overseas on oil production, and in places such as China as well, where we don't really want to do that, we can invest on energy production, which happens completely locally. The money we spend, we invest locally, and we get the energy back from the air, from the wind, from the sun, locally. He says all of these technologies are based on the idea that we're going to have global design and development and local production. Each one of these sectors essentially is trending to a near zero cost, distributed, localized, negative carbon production system. I've been talking about this for a while now. Near zero cost. Eventually, That's where energy is going. And that is why I think people like Bill Gates don't really understand what's happening. Rather than investing in some things which sound good, I think it's more important to invest in this. And I think this is exactly how we can actually save a lot of people from being in poverty. This is exactly how we can save a lot of people from being in poverty and extreme poverty by enabling them to produce their own energy. All of them are going through phase change disruptions and transformation at the same time in the 2020s. And this is why we're seeing in the 2020s such dysfunction, such instability around the world. Now, there is dysfunction and instability around the world now. That is fair to say, I think. We can all admit that. But what I believe is this will all resolve itself. Not all of it, but the majority of it. And eventually, we will see a world that is significantly better than it is today. And all of this will be thanks to technology, solar, wind, batteries, and electric cars. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and thank you for watching.